Try to put yourself in Daniel's shoes. Here was a man of God who was greatly respected, tremendously loved by God. And God showed him things that you and I can only dream about seeing. Some of what he saw is today, right now probably. I mean, imagine, you're Daniel, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, centuries ago. And God decides that he is going to use you to interpret the dream of Nebuchadnezzar that he put into his head, and that dream turns out to be what we call the times of the Gentiles, which is what we are living in, the times of the Gentiles. So, during the reign of Cyrus, this is chapter 10 now, we have Daniel receiving another vision. Another vision. And by now he's probably a little bit used to the visions he was receiving. And this is really probably one of my favorite portions of the book of Daniel. Because, let me get my Bible out here. I keep my Bible on my phone. I still always feel a little guilty when I'm in church on Sunday and I'm messing with my phone, because I'm thinking, well, people are going to be seeing me and they think I'm going to be playing a game or something. But, well, sometimes I play a game. No, seriously, I have my Mantis Bible study on here, and I usually take all the notes, and when Craig does his sermon, I type those things in here. But anyway, Daniel 10 is fascinating, because it is where Daniel prays and prays and waits. And he waits for 3 weeks. Nothing. 21 days. Nada.
No meat or wine touched. Is that when no meat or wine touched his lips?
Say what now?
No.
Is that the time when no meat or wine touched his lips?
Oh,
He fasted, didn't he?
he did fast,
Yes.
thank you. Yes. Verse 3, thank you. I did not eat any tasty food, nor did meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I use any ointment at all until the entire 3 weeks were completed. Well, he didn't just set out and say, I'm going to fast for 3 weeks. He basically said, I'm going to fast until I hear from God. And he didn't really know how long that was going to be. But yes, that's exactly right. So he winds up waiting 21 days for this interpretation. And then on the 24th day of the first month, while I was by the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose waist was girded with a belt of pure gold of Uphaz. His body also was like beryl. His face had the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches. His arms and feet like the gleam of polished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a tumult. Now, some commentators argue that this individual was Jesus Christ, a pre-incarnate version. I'm not quite so sure because of what comes next, but you can decide for yourself. Now, I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, while the men who were with me did not see the vision. Kind of reminds me of Paul on the road to Damascus. Nevertheless, a great dread fell on them, and they ran away to hide themselves. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, yet no strength was left in me. But I heard the sound of his words, and as soon as I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. Then behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said to me, O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words that I am about to tell you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling, and then he said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and humbling yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then, behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. Now, I have come to give you an understanding of what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision pertains to the days yet future. Okay, why is it likely possible that this figure is not Jesus Christ in pre-incarnate form?
He needed help.
Pardon me?
He needed help.
He needed help. He needed help. Which boggles my mind why some commentators will say that they are convinced that this individual was Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ would not need any other angel to come to his aid. Period. You can bet on it. We know it. Doesn't matter if it's Michael or anybody. So that's my one big objection. So I'm content in believing it's not Jesus Christ. I believe it is some angelic individual. It could be Gabriel, but he doesn't name himself. So we can't be sure that it's Gabriel. Nonetheless, here's what we know. We know that not all angels were created equal. Don't we? We know that Paul talks about the elect angels to Timothy. And in my estimation, he is talking about those angels who were chosen by God never to sin, never to fall under any circumstances. Those are the elect angels. That obviously doesn't apply to all angels because we know that at least a third of them fell and followed Satan. And some of those angels that fell and followed Satan are extremely, extremely powerful. Powerful enough to stop an angel like this, who was only able to continue on his journey to Daniel after 21 days because Michael, the archangel, left the throne, came to his aid, and helped him leave so he could continue on his journey. So for 21 days, and we also learn in chapter 10, and again this is a summary so I don't want to talk too much about this, we learn in chapter 10 that there is what is called a prince of Persia and a prince of Greece. These are not human beings. How could they be human beings? What gives it away to us? What tells us there's no way these individuals could be human beings? What tells us right off the bat? Excuse me? They were battling with an angel. Okay? There is no way a human being could hold back an angel for 21 seconds, much less 21 days. Wouldn't happen. So we know that this prince of Persia obviously has to do with the kingdom, the empire of Persia. The Medes and the Persians were ruling at that time. Isn't that interesting? They're ruling by God's decree, or by God allowing it, and yet Satan is still working very hard to withstand God's purposes in and through the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. And when he says, and when I leave here, I'm going to eventually be contending with the prince of Greece, what does that tell you? Well, once the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians falls, who does it fall to? Greece, Alexander. And another prince, that one who is given charge of the empire of Greece, will then be standing up and doing his level best. Isn't that interesting, though? And I'm wondering, well, why didn't the angel just take another route? I don't know. Say what?
That minister back to the New Testament. The question says that my Father is government according to his word and his desire.
Okay. All right. The other thing, of course, is I have no idea what the spiritual realm looks like. Do you? No idea. Elijah, is it Elijah or Elisha? Elijah. And Elisha, excuse me. Wasn't Elisha the one who prayed that the young man's eyes would be open? It was Elisha. What did the young man see? Angelic hosts, armies, covering the hills. In the what? The spiritual realm. I mean, imagine the angelic activity that could very well be happening in this room right now, offering protection to us from the powers of the enemy. We don't think of that because we never see them. So here we are, we have princes of Persia and princes of Greece, and they're most likely demons, very powerful ones, who are placed by Satan to have control over those areas. And you can bet they report back to him. We learn again, as I said, that all angels are not created equal in strength. No matter how powerful this particular individual looks and sounds, he was waylaid, he was held back by the Prince of Persia. Don't know what that looked like. No idea. Couldn't tell you. Wish I could. All right, so now, chapter 11, a brief summary of chapter 11. We have more conflicts to deal with. We learn more details about the kings of the north and the kings of the south. And some of this imagery and some of these kings are mentioned elsewhere in Scripture, specifically in Ezekiel and even in the book of Revelation. So it all ties together. By the way, you ought to study the book of Zechariah, because Zechariah is probably the most apocalyptic book of the entire Old Testament. When we talk about the apocalypse, we usually think of Revelation. Zechariah is the book of apocalypse for the Old Testament. It's amazing. Fascinating book. Absolutely fascinating. We learn a great deal more about a guy that I mentioned last week whose name is Antiochus Epiphanes. Turns out this guy has a mouth that likes to brag.
Blasphemous.
Blasphemous mouth that likes to brag. He loves himself. Loved himself. And Antiochus Epiphanes is often referred to because he was a very true historical figure. He lived in right around the 100s BC, and he did something, as I mentioned last week, that was terrible to the Jews in 168 BC. This is documented historically outside of the Bible. He is a real historical figure. So we find out a lot about him. And what's very, very interesting is Antiochus Epiphanes is often referred to as a type of Antichrist. And we begin to see why as we study the book of Daniel. So what the Antichrist will be is what Antiochus Epiphanes was, except of course the Antichrist will be global, and he will be bigger and more powerful and more blasphemous than Antiochus. Antiochus was Israel's and Syria's main oppressor. I don't know if you like history. I've always liked history. It's just fascinating to me. So Antiochus was Israel's and Syria's main oppressor. Look at what's going on today. Syria doesn't really have a beef with Israel. They really don't, if you stop to think about it. The media and certain powers that be are making Syria look like the bad guy. Why? Well, because the powers that be want to topple Assad's government. Why? Because they want to put a Muslim Brotherhood puppet in there. Why? Because that's what they did with Libya. That's what they did with Egypt, or tried to. That's what they did with Tunisia, or tried to. They're really trying to recreate that entire area of the globe so that Islam, through the Muslim Brotherhood, has control of that area. But that's only going to be on paper. The people who have the real control are the people behind them, the global elite. So they want to set up these puppet regimes so that when they come to power, they can knock those regimes out of the way. So what they're trying to do is create, to make the world think like Syria is the real bad guy in that region. And they're really not. Yes, there are problems with Assad's regime, but under Assad, as a Christian, you had more freedoms in his regime than you do now. And who are we supporting? Not Assad. We are supporting, not by our choice, I'm sure, the rebels who are trying to topple Assad, who are beheading Christians, who are raping and killing women, who are destroying cities. Those are the people that the Obama administration believes we should support. So Syria, even back then, they didn't have a real issue with Israel. Today, they don't have a real issue with Israel. But they're being forced. They want them out so they can put in a Muslim Brotherhood so that they will be able to surround Israel from all sides. And unfortunately, if we take the Bible seriously, we know that that is going to eventually happen. May not happen tomorrow or 6 months or even next year. It will happen. It will happen. Antiochus, as I mentioned, is a type of Antichrist. If you want to learn about what the Antichrist is going to be like, read up on him. The Bible doesn't tell us much. It tells us only a little. If you want to read 1st and 2nd Maccabees, it's a book in what they call the Apocrypha. You can buy those books separately, the 1st and 2nd Maccabees. It tells all about Antiochus Epiphanes and what happened after he did what he did to the Jews. And how the hammer, that was his nickname, from the Maccabee family, rose up against Antiochus Epiphanes and gathered a whole huge Jewish group of people to overcome Antiochus. This is historical fact. You know, the hammer, he could not stand the fact that Antiochus Epiphanes had defiled the Jewish temple. He couldn't sit for it. So, Antiochus is a type of Antichrist. Again, he's not the actual. Some people believe that he was the actual Antichrist. Others believe that Herod was. Or most who believe that the Antichrist already came was Nero. But those people, none of them were the Antichrist. The Antichrist is yet to come. And a little bit of what he did. In 168 BC, he was returning from Egypt. He'd gotten into an argument with them in a skirmish and he lost. Well, when you have an ego the size of Manhattan or the size of New York, you don't like to lose. So you're on your way back to, Middle East from Egypt. And you're not feeling well. You're angry. You're embarrassed. You're upset. Who do you take it out on? The Jews. And that's what he did. So he veered off, went to Israel, went to Jerusalem, and then he decided to go inside the temple and desecrate it. He slaughtered a pig on the altar. He sprinkled pig's broth or pig's blood around the interior of the Holy of Holy Places. He sat down in it. He also brought in a statue of Zeus. And that's what defiled the temple. That happened in 168 BC. And it became known as the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that desolated. It's an actual historical event. And this is what Jesus is referring to in Matthew 24, when he says, just as Daniel spoke about the abomination of desolation, and then Matthew adds the words, let he who has ears hear. Let the reader understand. That's what he's talking about. And Jesus is pointing to the far-flung future, saying that event is going to be repeated. The Antichrist is going to do that event, except he won't be bringing in a statue of Zeus. He will basically walk into the Holy of Holies, sit down, and declare himself to be God. And at that point, he will make a law that anyone who does not worship him is not worth allowing to live. That's what he does. And again, that's future. All right, more in chapter 12. Daryl, you got it right. Then comes the end. Then comes the end. I mentioned this a while ago, but there are two ages in the history of this planet. This age that we are living in right now. And the next age. The next age is when Jesus sets up his physical kingdom and reigns for 1,000 years from his father David's throne in Jerusalem. 2 ages we're living in. This one now, and the next one is coming. This one, then the next. Just 2 ages. That's all there is, as far as the Jewish sages were concerned. At the beginning of chapter 12, Michael the archangel rises. And we'll get more into this. He rises. And again, what's the whole premise here? It's really the unfolding drama of redemption as seen through Daniel's eyes. The drama of redemption is exactly that. It is a battle. A battle that God never, ever loses. But it has many levels to it. And it's interesting when we study the book of Daniel to see how this redemption is seen. Because as I mentioned last week, we see some things from Daniel's eyes, and other visions are seen from God's eyes. It's fascinating. Just like in the book of Revelation, we see some things from John's eyes, and then all of a sudden, he's called up to heaven. So in essence, even though he's still seeing it, and he's describing it from his eyes, he's seeing it at that point from God's perspective. It's fascinating. When Michael rises in chapter 12, he is ready to do battle. That must be an awesome sight in the spiritual realm. To see Michael, the archangel, get up. It's almost as if he's chomping at the bit. Let me out. My time's here. Okay, I'm ready. I want to go. And he rises, ready for battle, and he will be in defense of Israel. Michael is always associated with Israel. So he's standing up, and it coincides with the terrible things that will happen on earth at a future time. And what's fascinating, folks, is, I don't know if you've been keeping up on this, it's really difficult to keep up on everything. I can't do it. I don't know any one person who can. But there's so much happening in this world. I just read last week that the drought in California, where we used to live, has become so severe. I think this is its 6th or 7th year at least. It's become so severe that agriculturally they are going to have to actually let over 500,000 acres lie fallow because they do not have enough water. And we sit there and we think, oh, those poor people in California, it's a shame. No. The poor people of the United States. California is our salad bowl. It's the salad bowl.
And
that's
our
where
meat
the
bowl.
food comes from. What?
And our meat bowl.
And our meat bowl. I mean, think about it. Agriculture is big in California. 500,000 acres are just going to sit fallow because they don't have enough water. And it's not the farmers who waste the water. What does that mean? Well, the article said that cantaloupe and broccoli are going to be the hardest hit, but every vegetable you can think of is going to be affected. That means shortages. I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just saying this is the reality. So, what does that mean? We go to the grocery store.
Higher prices.
Yeah. You go to somebody and say, I'm sorry, do you have any more broccoli? Oh, no. We only had 2 stalks of that this morning and sold out. Higher prices. Shortages. There is one huge company among many that has thousands and thousands of head of cattle, Harris Ranch. Ranchers have been having to cut the number of their herds for the last 3 to 5 years because of the lack of water. It takes water to grow grain, oats, and grasses that the cows eat. They don't have the water. That means they can't have as many cows. That means when you and I go to the store to buy steak, forget steak, hamburger. It's not going to be cheap. So what can we do with these things? Well, we can make plans for it. We can do the best we can, knowing that God is going to provide for us, trust His leadership and guidance, not waste our money, not make foolish decisions, and just do the best we can. So the terrible things that are happening, that's speaking of the Great Tribulation, which we are not in yet. But all of what we're experiencing, famines, terrible weather, 10,000 birds falling out of the sky, dying, hundreds of thousands of fish floating up onto the beach. I mean, this is all the beginning of birth pains. And I'm still amazed at how many people don't see that. I'm just amazed at that. It's like, Sylvia and I are thinking, all right, we need to make some wise decisions here, so we need to cultivate a garden and do it right. And maybe we should buy half a cow and have it butchered up and stick in the freezer. And maybe, there are things we can do. Because again, I don't want to impress or scare anybody, but I read another article today about economically, financially, what's coming down the road here because of if the United States gets to the point where other countries stop buying our credit, our debt, if they decide, no, we're done, we're not buying any more of your debt, and they extend credit to us based on the debt they buy, if they do that, which they will, what do you think that means? Say goodbye to the dollar bill. I mean, it is incredible to me. And we have an administration that continues to spend and spend and spend. And my conviction is, I don't want to get political, but my conviction is they're doing that because they want the destruction of the U.S. dollar to happen. China has already decided they want to be one of the new currencies. The yuan. So you sit there and you go, well, once we are not the, what do you call it, fiat currency, then how is that going to affect America? Hopefully you have your house paid off. Hopefully you didn't go out and just pay $35,000 for a new vehicle. We'll see. But we need to be making good decisions based on what's coming. And we sure won't be able to stand up and go, hey, we didn't know. Nobody told me. All right, next one. The stone built without hands crushes all Gentile empires. Yay! Goes back to chapter 2. And what's amazing? When that stone that was carved was made without hands, human hands, comes down on the feet of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about. Not only does it crush and destroy all those empires, but there's nothing left of them. Nothing. There's no residual dust. It's gone. It's almost as if they never were here. It's amazing. So the stone built without hands. And then the stone, of course, represents Jesus and his earth, and that stone fills the earth. His kingdom will be truly a global kingdom. Now let me say this about when we talk about redemption and God's plan for the earth, there are plenty of people he still wants to save, correct? Okay. So, as Christians, we need to be those people who live the life, talk the talk, and walk the walk, right? That's just simply the way it's going to be. And God's going to use us for that purpose. But what I also find fascinating here when we talk about these empires, how one, and we'll get into this a little bit more, how one rises up from another, and then you started with which empire? Babylon, right?
Yeah.
But you know what's funny? The Babylon system, as described in the Bible, is still with us. It didn't really go away. And what's fascinating is here's the empire of Babylon, right? What happened? Who destroyed it? Who took it over? The Medes and the Persians. Do you know it's basically in the same area of the world? The geography is very similar, same area. And the Medes and the Persians caved way to who? Alexander. Well, guess what? His Grecian Empire is basically in the same place. A little bit bigger in parts, a little bit smaller over here. Same place geographically. Same area of the world. And Greece was broken up after his death into 4 smaller empires, and then eventually came Rome. Roman Empire.
Larger.
Same areas, larger, but it's basically the same. So each successive empire not only conquered, but incorporated that previous empire into their own. Which tells me something. That the final beast, the final empire, will rise up from where Rome existed. It will start there and spread. Which tells me also that the Antichrist is probably also going to come up from that area of the world. Remember when people said, Obama, he's the Antichrist. You remember that? And it's like, no, I don't think so. No, not even close. He's not intelligent enough to be. I mean, he could be a very smart man, but he's not in the right area either.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jesus will reign from his earthly father David's throne in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. 1,000 years, and we have never got to forget that the Bible tells us he will reign with a what? Rod of what? Iron. It's not going to be smooth sailing. Justice will be meted out instantly. He will be what? Judge, jury, and executioner if need be. In the same individual, he will be king. The final monarchy. The only legitimate, real, authentic, judicial monarchy that works in absolute justice and truth. And yet people are still going to try him. Try him. All right. Daniel, we're going to go back to Daniel 1 now and kind of start this over and get a little bit more into depth into each one. This is starting to get fascinating for me. I always get goosebumps. Daniel is taken into captivity in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Israel and Judah had no excuse for their downfall. None. God was so patient with them. Just like he is with us. There's a big difference, though. We are part of his church. We're the bride of Christ. There is no chance God would ever reject us as people, individually. In the Old Testament times, God had no problem executing 3,000 or more Jews who were rebellious. Because God looks at Israel as one nation. If one person in that nation screws up, it falls on the entire nation. That's not the way it is with the church. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Plus, we have the Holy Spirit living within us. Plus, Christ's righteousness is imputed to my account. So when God looks at me, he sees Christ's righteousness. He doesn't see my filthiness. In the Old Testament, salvation is always the same, right? It's faith in God. Noah believed God. It was counted for him as righteousness. Yeah. He believed him. It doesn't say Noah obeyed God and it was counted as righteousness. Noah believed God. So it's faith, always faith. But in the Old Testament, God decided, you know what? Yes, it's faith to have salvation. But you know what? I have these rules. In order to approach me, you have to do this, 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 and this in order to come close to me. That was God's rule. Today, we don't have those rules. Paul tells us, come boldly before the throne of grace. Totally different. I'm sure that if I lived in the Old Testament, I would have been a perfect example of a saint, right? No. I would not have done half as well as those people. I'm sure. Thank God, for my sake, for our sake, that we live in this time period. One we call grace. But it's always grace. Doesn't matter if it's the Old Testament, it's all grace. So, the king of Judah, was he a great king? Who can tell me a little bit about Jehoiakim?
No, he wasn't.
No, he was not. Give me an example, Sylvia, of how... Huh?
He sinned.
Yeah, he sinned. How? What did he do?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I thought you all knew. Sorry.
I knew what Manasseh did.
Was he an idolater?
Oh, yeah, they all were idolaters.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he was an idolater.
How was he idolater? How was he? What did he do?
Did he set up the calves?
Huh?
Did he set up the 10 golden calves?
what?
The
The 2 golden calves. I believe he did. He actually not only allowed, but by his actions encouraged the people of Judah to participate in idolatry. That's not a good thing. Not when God's your God, or he's supposed to be. So, Jehoiakim was warned enough, and the day of reckoning came. God used Nebuchadnezzar as his arm of judgment on unrepentant Israel. And they just continued in idolatry. In the Old Testament, Israel, Judah, they had a big problem with idolatry. I don't know why. Wait a minute. Do we? Yes. We don't worship before the golden calf, but we worship things. Right now, I'm on a special diet that I have to be on for 2 months. And it's only by God's grace that I'm on this. I have to avoid 28 things, because I have food allergies to these 28 things. I have to avoid gluten. I have to avoid a number of other things. Try finding a loaf of bread that has no gluten, no dairy, no wheat, no yeast. Go ahead. Try finding. I thought I found one, and I was done with the loaf, and I said, we got to order some more of these. And then as I looked more closely, it has spelt as the S-P-E-L-T as the main ingredient. Well, guess what? Spelt is a derivative from wheat.
It's a kind of wheat. Yeah.
Gluten. So here I am thinking I'm doing so good, only to find out you're doing so bad, because every day, start the day with a piece of toast made of spelt, which is gluten. But my point here is, I love food. Darn it. I like pizza. I am Italian. I love Italian food. I'm allergic to tomatoes and cheese.
And
And I
gluten.
can't have bread, so that's no pizza there.
No noodles.
No noodles. I have to have special noodles made with rice. And fortunately, I only have to do this 2 months. I'm also, get this, allergic to lettuce. I can't have salads. But I'm sitting there thinking, it's by God's grace that I haven't cheated knowingly. Because as much as I like food, I've been kind of breezing through this, which is really amazing for me. I haven't had chocolate. I'm allergic to cocoa. So, you know, sugar's fine. I can have sugar. Whoopee.
Eat rice cereal.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what he's eating. Rice cereal with rice milk.
Yeah, I get rice milk now. Put it on my gluten-free cereal. Yeah. Can't have hot dogs. I can't. I'd like to have a hamburger, but I can't have ketchup. I'm allergic to mustard too. Water's okay. Water's good. So I sit there and I'm going, Sylvia asks me today, she goes, well, what would you like for lunch? Well, let's see, honey. I know I can have pork, chicken, beef,
Fish.
fish. There we go, one of those. But I'm grateful because I don't have to puree my food up and suck it through a straw or something. So what I guess my point is that we all have these things that we love. I've tried every ice cream, dietetic, and everything, and it's like, no, it tastes like Breyers or Bluebell. Sorry. But God's getting me through it. And I've lost 10 pounds, and I'm feeling better. The fog is lifting, and I'm not as tired as I used to be. So, gee, maybe there is something there. You know, with some of the stuff we eat that actually winds up killing us. But these people were out and out idolaters. They worshipped the Asherah poles on the high place. God said, okay, you know what? Enough. Nebuchadnezzar, get in here. And so that's what his job was. God raised Nebuchadnezzar up to do that, to be the arm of judgment, to go in and mete out God's judgment on the nation of Israel. What's fascinating, though, is that Nebuchadnezzar could have really done terrible things to those people. And he was actually very fair. Even when he took all of the utensils and everything from the temple, he didn't abuse it. He locked them up in his storage so that nothing bad would happen to them. So the verse 2 says, the Lord gave to Nebuchadnezzar. The Lord gave to Nebuchadnezzar. The Lord is in charge. He lifted up, he raised up Nebuchadnezzar for that specific thing. And I believe eventually Nebuchadnezzar put faith in God.
Yeah.
God had to work out a few kinks with Nebuchadnezzar. He was a very arrogant man. See all that I have built? What happened then? He built
went
it
nuts.
by God's grace, by God's strength, by God allowing and giving him the opportunity to do that. But then he didn't give any glory to God, so God said, all right, okay, humbling time. And for 7 years, he lived in the field, hair long, nails long, and he lived like an animal. And then when the 7 years was up, he came to his senses. That must have felt weird. Wow. And then they receive him back and he's king again. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So the Lord gave to Nebuchadnezzar Jehoiakim and some of the vessels from the temple. And Nebuchadnezzar took these vessels and stored them in the house of what? His God in Shinar. Where have you heard the land of Shinar before?
Nimrod.
Nimrod, Genesis 10 and 11. That's where Satan's city started. God's city has always been Jerusalem. Satan's city was Babylon, on the plain of Shinar, where the Tower of Babel began to rise to the heavens. So this is what we see. Here's Jerusalem over here. Here's Babylon, Shinar, Nimrod's, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And by the way, Nimrod, from Genesis 10, was not just a guy who, was charismatic and people flocked to him. He already had empires. He already had kingdoms. He was just adding to his kingdom, which is another reason why many commentators believe that Nimrod was also a type of Antichrist. So, there's the land of Shinar. Oh, by the way, that land is still there. It just has a different name today. Hasn't gone anyplace. They recently, within the last 5 years, uncovered what they believe to be Nebuchadnezzar's one of his temples in Babylon, where Babylon used to be, which is in what country?
Is it in Iraq?
It is in Iraq. And it's really fascinating because Saddam Hussein, before he died, was building his own little temple on a hill, of course, that overlooked Nebuchadnezzar's temple. But it was higher. But he never got to live in it. All right. So it's amazing to me how much stuff happens in the Middle East. And it will continue to happen. Many people have said, is the USA in the Bible in the end times? No. I don't think we're going to be much of anything once the bottom falls out of the United States. We won't have the strength, the power, the financial resources to even help Israel if we wanted to. And I think that's the goal, to get us out of the way, because we are, or at least were, the most powerful free nation in the world. And I think God mightily used us. But ever since, it was way before the 60s, but when the 60s happened, that's when a lot of stuff started pouring out into society. Stuff that just changed America forever. And those people on the left, the far left, have not let up, which is why we are in the shape we are in. So now, in Daniel chapter 2, it provides information on the individual empires. So we'll review that real quickly here. Daniel is shown the order in which the empires occur. Of course, that's Babylon, the Medo-Persian, the Greek, the Roman, and the revived, what we could call the Roman conglomerate. That's going to be the next kingdom and the final kingdom that's coming on the horizon. Isn't that weird? We live in 2014, right? Right? We live in modern times. And yet what we have to look forward to is one individual who is going to rise up. We don't know what his real name is, but we know that the Bible calls him the man of sin, the man of lawlessness, and a whole bunch of other things, as well as the Antichrist. And that Antichrist is literally going to rule the entire world. I think that that's very odd. Because we're civilized, aren't we? I mean, rulers like Alexander, and that was from a day gone by. You know, we don't have that anymore, right? Wrong. And I think that is just really strange. I really do. So, the revived Roman conglomerate, all of these nations, as I mentioned, came up from the same geographical area. This one's going to be no different. It's just going to be bigger. It's going to start there and expand. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Daniel chapter 2, God's revelation for Israel. This is exactly what the statue looked like that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of. This is exactly it. I'm just kidding, it's not, I have no idea. But basically you saw a statue, the head was of gold. The head was Babylon, as Daniel tells him. Babylon was an absolute monarchy. Absolute monarchy. The monarch was above the law. The monarch had no obligation to follow any laws. Nebuchadnezzar could do what he wanted to do. Kill that family, promote that one, deport all those families back there, get them out of here. Who is going to sit there and say, oh, well, you really can't do that, because Babylon City Charter doesn't allow you to do that. He was an absolute monarch. Notice these two arrows here. This one, going from gold to what? The bottom here increases in strength. And we're talking about the tensile strength of the metal. Gold is actually a pretty soft metal.
Yeah.
How many of you have gold? You're not going to admit it. Okay, now, going from the top to the bottom, it decreases in character of authority and rule. So, we start with the head of gold, a relatively soft metal. And we start with absolute monarchy. Then, the head of gold segues into the breast and arms of silver. It's a harder metal. It has more strength to it. But notice, the Medo-Persian Empire was not above law and could not change their own decrees.
Right.
Give me an example of how we know this from the book of Daniel.
Darius couldn't change. Wait. It couldn't change the decree to have Daniel not be in the
Remember the
lion's
decree
den?
that got Daniel thrown into the lion's den? Darius lost a lot of sleep over that because he couldn't change it once it was in effect. So in the Medes and the Persians, there was some limited aspects of that monarchy. It was not like Nebuchadnezzar's. And then we continue on, and we have the belly and thighs of brass, a more rigid metal. This represented Greece. Hellenistic kings had no dynastic or royal right to rule. They ruled by force and personal gifts. So imagine that. You're Alexander. You know there's probably a bunch of people who have eyes on your throne. You have to be 10 steps ahead of them. You have to be 10 times stronger. And you have to outwit them. Okay? Last one, legs of iron. Iron is by far the strongest metal of these. Tremendous strength in Rome. The world feared Rome. Their Roman soldiers were not to be messed with. But that republic, and by the way, it was a republic, not like America is a republic, but it was a democratic republic. Ours is a constitutional republic. A lot of people don't understand that. When our elected officials are elected, they're to go to Washington and do what? Take the oath of office, which says that they promise to what? Uphold the what? The Constitution of the United States of America. That's what they promise. Then they immediately start making laws that undermine the Constitution. That is called treason. That is called treason. Those people who do that should be instantly removed from office. And it wouldn't bother me if they were shot. But they could throw them into prison too. It's treason. That is a constitutional republic. Rome was a democratic republic, so it worked differently. they really degenerated. They got so large they degenerated into mob rule, and it merged with an imperial form of government with Caesar. So it went from total power in one person to almost mob rule in Rome. And part of their problem is the same problem that we're having. As Rome increased in size, it incorporated more and more different types of people into the Roman Empire. Well, a lot of those people didn't want to coalesce with Rome. They wanted to keep their own culture. It's happening in America because more and more people are being physically brought into this country who have absolutely no interest in following the Constitution or becoming part of our culture. They're not interested in it. For them, especially like Muslims, they hold Islam up here. That's what they're dedicated to. All right, we're going to go with the next chart and then we'll stop. This is just a different look at it. Sorry I made these small. This right there says, Jerusalem and Solomonic temple have been destroyed in 586 BC. Israel is taken captive to Babylon. So this happened before Nebuchadnezzar was on the scene. But then he came in and conquered Jerusalem with finality. That happened in about 606 to 536. About 606, that's when Nebuchadnezzar ruled. That's when he ruled. And then the Bible describes Nebuchadnezzar as a lion-like beast with eagle's wings. And it's interesting the way the Bible, the imagery, is set apart for each of these rulers, or each of these kingdoms. So that's this one, that's the first Gentile empire. The second Gentile empire is the brass, the arms, and the breastplate, and of course that's the Medo-Persian. And the main rulers were Darius and Cyrus, two different rulers. They never quite coalesced. They're bear-like beasts devouring flesh, and yet they were lopsided as an empire because they could not actually coalesce the Persians and the Medes to become one empire. They couldn't do it. And that eventually was part of the reason that they fell, although they lasted for a few hundred years. And then it segued into the third Gentile empire, and this is Alexander. He's represented by the belly and thighs of bronze from 331 to 323, not a long time at all. He died at the age of, I think, 32. And he was represented by the leopard-like beast with 4 wings. Why 4 wings? Because when he died, his kingdom was divided up among his 4 generals. And the 4 generals each had different parts of the kingdom, which I find fascinating. Ptolemy had, you've heard of Ptolemy from your English or your history studies, Egypt, Palestine, and then Arabia, Petrea. Seleucus had Syria, Babylon, and India. Cassander had Macedonia and Greece, and Lysimachus had Thrace and Bithynia. Now, that is exactly what the Bible describes, how the one horn was broken into 4 pieces. That's what that's talking about. And then out of that came a little horn. And we'll talk about that next.
But before you go on, the beasts at the bottom are the ones described in Daniel 7, right?
That's right, thanks.
Okay.
These are described in Daniel 7, but there is a parallel here between these beasts
And the kingdoms.
and these kings and
Okay.
empires. It's the same, it's describing the same thing, but just looking at it a little bit differently. And the way to understand this is from man's perspective, and this is from God's perspective. Any questions, comments? I hope I didn't go too fast. Can you make a mark of where we left off?
Okay.
It's on this one right here, Babylon, the First Empire. We're going to go over, we're going to start back with Babylon, the First Empire. We're going to show next time, again, the through line of God's redemptive purposes. So we're going to get into more detail.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead and
You
ask.
said it kept getting stronger and stronger. Then
The
you
metal.
moved the bottom one.
Then what?
You said that it starts and it gets stronger and stronger.
Yes.
The statue, but not the final.
No, the final one is really interesting because it's a mixture of clay
Yeah.
and metal, steel. which is
That
even
means
worse.
it's gonna fall
Yeah, there's no stability in it. And if you think about the fact that that kingdom only lasts 7 years, that's proof of that. That's the tribulation. It's amazing. We'll get into that more next week. Any other questions, comments?
my son sent me an email and said 70% of the world believes that Christianity is the most repressive religion.
Really?
That's sad.
It is sad. Those people obviously don't know a whole lot about
They don't-
Islam.
They don't know about Christianity.
No, they
Yeah,
don't.
they don't know the truth.
Because they think Christianity is just a bunch of do's and don'ts. Okay. Nothing else then? Let's close in prayer. Malcolm, before you leave, I have a question for you. Don't let me forget. Thank you, Jesus, for this time. Thanks for your word. Help us to see the through line of the redemptive process that you designed. The end of everything comes back to you so that you're glorified. Help us as your children to live lives that please you, and by pleasing you, we know that you are glorified. Be with us as we go to our homes now. Keep us safe this week. Bring us back either Wednesday or Sunday. And I pray that this week we will touch someone's life for you, that they may have their eyes open, see the truth, and embrace that truth. Pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.